Louis, stand up. Your father's passing.
The civil rights movement aimed to abolish legalized racial segregation. The film industry began having white and black actors share more screen time. Film examples that exhibit this are To Kill a Mockingbird, released in 1962, and Nothing But a Man, released in 1964. Movies like this initiated filmmakers to start focusing on the political and social instability in the country, calling for the end of racial injustice, an issue that is still being explored in today's film industry.
So the fail-safe box. Open our operational orders.
Another factor that influenced the film industry during the 60s was the ongoing Cold War. Fears of nuclear warfare and mass destruction resulted in these issues being incorporated into cinema. War propaganda and widespread media was transformed into the film industry. The film Fail-Safe is one that really highlights this concern of nuclear warfare. Additionally, the Cold War in the 1960s marked the height of a technological superiority competition between the United States and the Soviet Union to see who could be more successful in outer space and determine who were the true leaders of the world. This is now known as the space race. In the end, the US was the first to put on a man on the moon and was proven to be more technologically advanced. The 1968 science fiction film 2001: A Space Odyssey is one example of space movies that came out during this time period, and it sparked a trend of many more space-related science fiction films in the following decade.
Pride marked the fateful day when he'll report to Uncle Sam and bravely march away. Oh, bye, bye, birdie. The army's got you now. I'll try, birdie, to go on somehow.
Marilyn Monroe's impact as a model and actor set a standard for beauty and a symbol of revolution for the era. This resulted in many teen movies that came from this time period. The Vietnam War had a massive effect on society as people grew cynical and uneasy, along with hatred rising within the common people. The release of The Manchurian Candidate in the 60s reflects the scared and uneasy feelings of the people as the movie circulates around the fear of war. This also resulted in the creation of the movie Easy Riders, reflecting on the poor aspects of U.S. society and hatred that was spread.
Francis Truffaut is a prime example of influential directors during the 1960s. A French director, actor, and critic, Truffaut sparked a large change in French filmmaking. His films like Shoot the Piano Player and Jules and Jim were shaped by the French New Wave, in which old and traditional means of filmmaking were pushed away in a movement of revolutionary ideas. As a critic and filmmaker, Truffaut challenged and revolutionized conventional tactics of filmmaking, as well as shaping the New Wave movement as a pioneer of change. Truffaut also goes past the 1960s into the 70s as he directs more movies revolving the drama genre, which has been a key result of the New Wave as popular topic.
Stanley Kramer was an American film director born on September 29, 1913, in New York City. He was known for directing Judgment at Nuremberg and Inherit the Wind. These films were influenced by the ending of World War II far in the past, as well as the current Vietnam War and the counterculture movement that came with it. Kramer transcended film directing of the 1960s by bringing light to social issues such as war that other film studios tried avoiding. Furthermore, he had films based on racism, like Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, which was another prevalent issue that most others chose not to discuss. This made his works more unique than the others and encouraged more coverage of these social issues in the future.
Alfred Hitchcock was an English film director who did his work for over 6 decades, and in that time directing 50 feature films, most of which are widely known. His works of the 1960s include Psycho from 1960 and The Birds, 1963. His use of violence shows his true influence of the time, like the Vietnam War. Hitchcock was able to transcend his time by adding a new aspect of horror through directing Psycho. In the film, he delves into the psychological aspects of human as well as creating sympathy for the villain, as Norman Bates is shown to be a nice man with a mental disorder along with a killer. Hitchcock was able to stay relevant in the future by changing the topics and themes in which his movies are built. Hitchcock directed Family Plot in 1976, which had stuck to thrillers, but also added comedy to appeal to the audience at the time. As time passes in the film industry and demographics change, a need for change is necessary. More action-packed as well as content appealing to younger audiences have been a priority as television shows stole the attention from viewers from films.
As well as TV shows attempting to overshadow the film industry, film companies used new tactics in funding and financing new films overseas and independently produced domestic pictures in order to produce more profitable and better distributed products. During the time, large competitors such as HBO and Showtime had worked together to finance the production of films in order to generate more profit together.
Vacation is here, beach party tonight.
William Asher, the director of Beach Party, wanted to adapt and create films that were aimed towards a new audience, teenagers. Teenagers were not as represented in the film industry during the 1960s as they are today. When they were, however, portrayed in the 1960s movies, the focus was often on teens recklessly having fun and also conflicts in their romantic relationships.
The movie Beach Party basically invented the idea of a teen movie. This movie clearly depicted what it was like to be a teenager in the 60s. It wasn't aimed for adults to watch it, but more aimed for the teens, and it was a representation of acts against authority. The main idea in this movie is teenage independence, as the first part of the movie is a bunch of teens going on spring break together with no authority figure there to supervise them. All these teens wanted to do was surf and have a good time. This positive depiction brought a huge success to the movie and gave viewers a fun-filled experience.
Even though this movie had a low cost compared to the most popular movies at the time, the money made from it created a huge profit. This is because teenagers finally had a movie for themselves and did not care about the extra money that went into the details.
1960s horror movies reflect an era of change, uncertainty, and a generational gap. Along with industry changes, the America of the 60s had rising tensions overseas and at home in regards to the Cold War, Vietnam War, and Civil Rights Movement. These issues leaked into America's cinema, and specifically the horror genre.
Horror movies at this time delivered cautionary stories about the dangers of abandoning traditional values. During this time, the film industry was more open to implied nudity, on-screen violence, and other situations that challenged social morals. As seen in the movie Psycho, it also featured one of the first thrasher movies and set the pace for horror and thriller movies in the future for on-screen violence.
As horror and science fiction films gained a newfound popularity in the 1960s, new elements and conventions were introduced to this pre-existing genre. One example of this is the integration of realism within the films. Previously, horror and science fiction genre movies mainly focused on completely fictional antagonists and conflicts, such as radioactive monster or aliens invading the Earth. Entering the 1960s, however, the film genre became incorporating a more realistic approach, especially regarding psychological thrillers.
One such example is in the aforementioned film Psycho, released in 1960. Rather than having an inhumane antagonist, Psycho has Norman Bates, a seemingly normal young man, be the villain of the film.
This can be attributed to the widespread fear at the time, the Cold War, of nuclear violence and worldwide warfare following World War II, since the wickedness of mankind was feeble.
The 1960s brought the monsters of horror and sci-fi films into human forms, contrary to the popular conventions at the time. Albeit, the 1960s still produced an abundance of unrealistic science fiction and horror films, such as The Astro Zombies and The Planet of the Vampires. But Psycho and other similar 1960s films paved the way for more psychological thrillers, where the conflict was more realistic, which arguably makes them even more scarier.